right now there is a multi-million-dollar game of musical chairs happening in global manufacturing.
Yeah, and the music is it's scheduled to stop exactly 6 months from today.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you are an importer who, hasn't locked in a seat in Vietnam by December, your costs are about to skyrocket by 20% overnight.
It is a fiercely compressed timeline. I mean, the window of opportunity is wide open today, but the math dictates that it's going to slam shut very, very shortly.
Right. So welcome to today's deep dive. For you listening, let's establish exactly where we are on the calendar, because timing is everything here. Today is June 10th, 2026.
The clock is definitely ticking.
It really is. So we're pulling today from an urgent, highly detailed source document. It's titled The 2026 Vietnam Sourcing Roadmap, 12-month execution plan before capacity and energy constraints tighten.
Quite a mouthful, but incredibly important.
Yeah, exactly. And our mission today is to unpack exactly why global importers have this shrinking 6-month window to lock in their Vietnam supply chains.
Right.
And we are going to walk you through the step-by-step playbook to actually execute this before those structural constraints permanently tighten. So, okay, let's unpack this, because this isn't just your standard, hey, you should think about moving some factories advice.
No, not at all.
This is a high-stakes race against global capacity limits.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is that 2026 is presenting itself as a unique historical anomaly.
Right, like a perfect storm.
Exactly. We are looking at a rare convergence of shifting global tariffs
Yeah.
and a rapidly evolving domestic energy grid inside Vietnam.
Mhm.
And this convergence has created a massive but strictly temporary arbitrage window.
Yeah, temporary is the key word there. But real quick, before we jump into those shifting tariffs and energy grids, I want to make a quick note for you listening.
Oh, right. Good point.
Yeah, our source document heavily references things like Section 301 hearings and various international trade policies. For the purpose of this deep dive, we are strictly framing these as neutral business variables and supply chain risks.
Just the numbers.
Right, just the numbers. We are merely reporting the economic realities presented in the text to help you understand the landscape. We are not, let me be clear, we're not endorsing any political trade policies.
Yeah. And honestly, for an importer managing a massive supply chain, a tariff or a trade policy is, it's simply a line item that alters the final landed cost of a product.
Exactly.
Our job today is to analyze how those specific line items are radically fluctuating right now.
So before we look at how a company actually picks up and moves its supply chain, we really need to understand the underlying mechanics of why this clock is ticking so aggressively.
Yeah, the why is crucial.
The source document breaks down 5 structural shifts that have been documented in the first half of this year. But rather than just reading a timeline, it really seems like these shifts fall into 3 main buckets, right? Energy vulnerability, structural shipping efficiency, and regional tariff advantages.
That's a great way to categorize them.
Thanks. Let's start with that first bucket. The document points out that an energy crisis early this year created a temporary pricing vulnerability for factories. So how does an energy crisis give an importer leverage?
Well, you have to look at Vietnam's infrastructure. They currently import about 90% of their crude oil.
Wow, 90%.
Yeah, massive reliance on imports. So when geopolitical conflicts in the Middle East spiked global energy prices by up to 50% in late 2025.
Right, I remember that.
It severely impacted Vietnam's industrial sector. Manufacturing costs in the first quarter of 2026 jumped 12 to 18%, simply because it costs more to keep the factory lights on and the assembly lines running.
So the overhead just exploded.
Exactly. And when a factory owner is facing suddenly inflated overhead, they become desperate for guaranteed production volume.
Because they have to pay those bills regardless.
Right. A factory running at 60% capacity with high energy bills is just burning through cash.
Yeah.
If an importer can step in and promise to push them to, say, 90% capacity, the factory owner will offer a massive discount just to stop the bleeding.
Okay, so it's like, it reminds me of buying a heavy winter coat in July, right?
I like that analogy.
Like, factories are dealing with these crazy high energy costs right now, so they desperately need guaranteed volume.
Right.
So you get the massive discount if you commit before the winter rush in Q4.
Yeah, exactly. And the competitors who lock in 12-month contracts right now will have total margin protection, while latecomers will just have to eat those 15 to 20% cost increases later.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Which perfectly sets up the second bucket.
Yeah.
Structural shipping efficiency. The document highlights a massive 40 to 50% landed cost savings specifically for ready-to-assemble furniture coming out of Vietnam versus fully assembled imports from other countries.
The savings there are just staggering.
They really are. And the capacity to build this is there right now. But the source warns it will vanish by Q4. Why is Flatpak driving such extreme margin differences?
Well, think about it. Shipping fully assembled furniture essentially means you are paying premium ocean freight prices to ship empty air.
Oh, right, because it's already built.
Exactly. A fully built dresser takes up massive volume in a shipping container. Flatpak furniture eliminates that wasted space. It is incredibly dense and efficient to transport.
Makes sense.
And over the last few years, Vietnam has built out highly specialized infrastructure to manufacture and package these ready-to-assemble goods.
Okay, so that's where the 50% comes from.
Yes, the 50% margin advantage comes from stacking lower factory overhead with vastly optimized ocean freight utilization. But,
Always a but.
right, but physical factory space to manufacture flat-pack goods is finite. Once the broader market fully reacts to a 50% margin gap, that existing capacity will be swallowed up entirely.
Got it. And that brings us to the third bucket, which revolves around tariffs and regional optimization. The document notes that Vietnam imports overall grew 150% recently compared to flat imports from China.
Yeah, a massive shift.
But it specifically highlights what it calls the Australia strategy
Right.
as a template for the world. It cites a staggering 388% trade growth over 15 years, driven by something called AANZFTA. What exactly is that mechanism?
So ANZFTA stands for the ASEAN Australia New Zealand Free Trade Area.
Okay.
And beyond just being a trade agreement, it functions as a total elimination of friction. It grants zero-duty access for goods moving between these regions.
Zero duty. Nice.
Yeah, and when you combine zero tariffs with a highly efficient 5 to 6 day shipping lane from Vietnam to ports like Sydney, you fundamentally alter the retail model.
How so?
You move away from needing massive domestic warehouses in Australia to hold inventory, and instead move toward a rapid dropship model where goods are pulled directly from Vietnamese factories.
Wow, so skipping the warehouse step entirely.
Exactly. The 388% growth proves that when you permanently remove tariff friction and compress shipping times, an entire trade route transforms.
So we have these massive incentives, right? Factories desperate for volume, huge shipping efficiencies, tariff-free zones. But what happens to the importer who just, I don't know, sits on their hands and decides to wait until next year?
It's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, the document outlines a brutal penalty for delaying. If you wait until Q4 2026, you'll be looking at factories that are at absolute full capacity. Lead times will stretch to 70 to 90 days.
Which is a nightmare for inventory.
Right. And labor costs are projected to be up 8 to 12% year over year. Plus, port congestion is going to add another 15 to 30 days to your shipping time.
Yeah, latecomers will be penalized at every single stage of the supply chain. I mean, they will pay more to manufacture the goods, they will wait twice as long for the goods to be finished, and those goods will sit stranded outside congested ports.
It honestly reminds me of someone trying to sign a fixed-rate mortgage right before interest rates are projected to drop, but with a twist.
How do you mean?
Well, imagine you are locking in the price of a custom-built house while the builder is desperate for cash flow to keep their crew employed. You get a massive discount on the total price today.
Right.
But you also know that the builder's own material costs for lumber and copper are projected to plummet in a few months. When those material costs drop, the builder's profit margin widens, which guarantees they won't go bankrupt and abandon your project.
Oh, I see.
You get the cheap house, they get the financial stability to survive the current pinch. If you wait to sign the contract until the material costs drop, everyone else will be trying to hire that same builder, and the price of the house will just skyrocket.
That captures the dynamic perfectly. The competitors who are locking in their 12-month contracts right now are securing total margin protection before the rush. They are hedging against future volatility by providing the factory with stability today.
Okay, so the stakes for you listening are very clear. The September deadline to get ahead of this is looming. But how does a company actually execute this pivot? It requires ruthlessly identifying the correct product categories and actually testing the waters.
It's not a simple copy-paste job, that's for sure.
No, definitely not. So let's get into Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the roadmap, which cover weeks 1 through 16, essentially June through September of this year. Phase 1 is the category audit. And the margins they list here are wild. but they vary heavily by sector.
Very heavily.
Yeah, the document claims footwear yields 40 to 50% savings versus China. Furniture, like we mentioned, is 45 to 55%. Apparel is 30 to 40%. But then, this is interesting, they explicitly tell importers to avoid chemicals, heavy machinery, and precision optics. Why such a stark divide?
It really comes down to the maturity of the specific industrial ecosystems within Vietnam.
What do you mean by maturity?
Well, the country has spent decades heavily optimizing for labor-intensive, light manufacturing, and assembly-based industries. The supply chains for textiles, leather, wood components, they are deep and highly localized.
Right.
Conversely, heavy industrial manufacturing, complex chemical processing, and precision optics require vastly different infrastructure. You need specialized waste management, highly stabilized power grids, and a completely different class of engineering labor.
And Vietnam just isn't there yet for those sectors.
Right, those ecosystems aren't fully mature in Vietnam yet. The roadmap explicitly states that the goal is an overall 15 to 25% landed cost reduction. If an importer is projecting anything less than a 15% drop, the operational risk of moving a supply chain simply outweighs the financial benefit.
Let's zoom in on the apparel example for a second, because the roadmap claims a massive 30 to 40% savings.
Yeah.
But, I mean, a t-shirt is essentially the same t-shirt, whether it's sewn in China or Vietnam.
True.
So how does the geography alone create a 32% margin opportunity right out of the gate?
It comes down to the mechanics of compounding taxes.
Oh, taxes. Right.
Yeah. If an importer is manufacturing that t-shirt in China for the U.S. market, they are hit with a 40% total tax burden.
40%, that's huge.
It is. And that consists of a 25% base tariff on the finished apparel, layered on top of a 15% tariff specifically targeted at the raw fabric inputs. It is a compounding penalty.
Ouch. And what about Vietnam?
If that exact same t-shirt is manufactured in Vietnam, the total tax burden drops to 8%. You have a 6% base tariff and only a 2% tax on the fabric inputs.
Wow.
Yeah. The importer isn't changing the design, the material, or the retail price of the t-shirt. They are simply shifting the origin point to bypass a 32% structural tax penalty.
That is wild. But geography dictates strategy.
Right.
Depending on where the final customer actually lives.
Yeah.
The roadmap points out that your regional destination changes how you play this. It's like for Australia and New Zealand, importers leverage that AANZFTA agreement for zero tariffs.
Oh.
For North America, the document states importers need to hunt for at least a 15 percentage point tariff beat over China to make the move viable.
Exactly.
And for the European Union, it's about utilizing the Vietnam-EU Free Trade Agreement. But it specifically mentions routing through the Da Nang port. Why does the specific port matter so much for Europe?
Well, Da Nang is geographically positioned to optimize shipping lanes heading west toward the European continent. It basically bypasses some of the heavier southern congestion around Ho Chi Minh City.
Avoiding traffic jams on the water.
Exactly. Shaving 3 to 4 days off of sea transit by selecting the optimal departure port significantly improves cash flow cycles for European retailers.
Makes total sense. Which leads us directly into phase 2, the pilot. This covers weeks 9 through 16. You don't just, sign a multi-million-dollar contract blindly based on a spreadsheet.
Definitely not recommended.
Yeah. The roadmap instructs importers to order a pilot run of 100 to 300 units. You're looking for a defect rate of under 1.5%. You look for factory green flags like modern equipment and clear scheduling, and you watch out for red flags like cramped workspaces.
Right, standard auditing procedures.
But wait, I have to push back on this a little bit.
Okay, let's hear it.
45 to 55% savings on flat pack furniture just by shifting to Vietnam. A 32% margin gap on apparel. That sounds almost too good to be true.
It does sound high.
Right. When things are half the price, they're usually half the quality.
Mm-hmm.
Are we just sacrificing quality to buy cheap labor, or is this a genuine geographic advantage?
That's a fair question. But if we connect this to the bigger picture of Vietnamese industrialization, we see why the quality actually holds up. The savings are a byproduct of macroeconomic positioning, not cutting corners on the assembly line.
Okay, but how do we know they aren't cutting corners?
Because the vetting criteria outlined in the roadmap prevents you from working with a subpar facility. It mandates looking for ISO 9001 certifications as a non-negotiable baseline.
So for those who might not be familiar with the specifics, what does an ISO 9001 certification actually force a factory to do?
It is an international standard that requires a factory to implement a rigorous, documented quality management system.
Meaning what exactly on the floor?
It means they don't just inspect the final product to see if it's broken at the end of the line. They have standardized procedures at every single step of the manufacturing process to prevent the defect from happening in the first place.
Oh, I see.
And the roadmap also requires factories to have been established for at least 5 years. You aren't working with a startup that's still figuring out its machine calibration. These are mature operations.
Got it.
The financial savings come from bypassing tariffs and capitalizing on shipping efficiencies, not from utilizing shoddy materials.
Okay, that makes sense. The rigorous audit is your shield against bad quality. So let's assume you've executed the pilot perfectly. You found a mature facility that hits that sub 1.5% defect rate. The ultimate strategic move happens in phase 3 and phase 4.
The contract phase.
Yes, the contract negotiation. And this is where importers can actually play the energy market to their immense advantage. Let's break down the contracting phases, which run from October 2026 to June 2027.
This is a critical window.
It is. And the source advises a very hard-line negotiation tactic right now. You look the factory owner in the eye and say, commit to a 12-month volume with a fixed price, and we sign right now. Wait until October, and we will take our business elsewhere.
It's aggressive, but necessary.
Very. The document insists on demanding a fixed FOB price with no more than a 5% annual escalation and a 45 to 50-day guaranteed lead time. What exactly does securing a fixed FOB price do for the importer?
So FOB stands for free on board. It is a vital shipping term that dictates exactly where responsibility transfers. Securing an FOB price means the factory is legally and financially responsible for all the costs and risks of transporting the goods from their factory floor through domestic transit right up until the moment the cargo is loaded over the rail of the shipping vessel at the designated port.
Oh, wow. So they handle all the domestic headaches.
Exactly. By locking in a fixed FOB price, the importer is completely insulated from any sudden spikes in local Vietnamese trucking rates, port handling fees, or domestic supply chain bottlenecks.
That is a huge relief.
Yeah.
And the roadmap also details specific protective clauses that need to be baked into this contract. It mentions the absolute necessity of force majeure clauses to protect against port strikes or sudden raw material shortages.
Standard, but essential.
Right. It mandates specific AANZFTA compliance language for Australia importers. But it also highlights the need for Section 301 termination clauses for North America. What exactly is a Section 301 tariff, and why do we need a legal ripcord for it?
Section 301 is a piece of U.S. trade law that allows the government to impose tariffs on foreign countries that are deemed to be engaging in unfair trade practices. Currently, these are heavily levied against goods originating in China.
Right, the China tariffs.
Yeah. And the risk here is that if regulators decide that goods are simply being routed through Vietnam from China to dodge those tariffs.
Oh, like a loophole.
Yeah, a practice called transshipment. If they see that, they could suddenly expand Section 301 tariffs to include Vietnamese imports. If that regulatory hammer falls, your 30% margin advantage evaporates instantly.
So the clause lets you bail out.
Exactly. The termination clause ensures that if the tariff laws change unexpectedly, the importer can legally exit the contract without facing massive financial penalties.
Now here's where it gets really interesting, because the roadmap outlines what it calls the energy timeline checkmate.
This is my favorite part of the strategy.
It's so smart. We talked earlier about Vietnam importing 90% of its crude oil and how those early 2026 price spikes bumped manufacturing costs up 12 to 18%. That was the vulnerability.
Right.
But here comes the Q4 reversal. Massive amounts of domestic solar and wind energy are scheduled to come online in Q4 2026. The projection in the document is that renewables will reach 10 to 12% of the country's total power generation by December and 14 to 16% by June 2027.
Which is a massive infrastructural shift.
Exactly. This influx of domestic power is going to physically alter factory unit economics, driving manufacturing costs down 15 to 20% from their peak.
It changes the whole game.
It does. Let me make sure I'm explaining the genius of this clearly for everyone listening.
Yeah.
You agree to a fixed price right now in June 2026. The factory is currently feeling the pain of high imported oil prices, so they desperately want your guaranteed volume to cover their overhead.
They need the cash flow.
Right, so you sign the deal. Then, when the factory's energy costs drop in Q4, because the solar and wind infrastructure actually comes online, they reap the immediate operational benefit. Their profit margins temporarily widen, which is why they are thrilled they signed the deal with you.
Win-win so far.
But you get price protection all through 2027. While your competitors are scrambling next year, paying elevated spot prices because all the factories are totally full, you are locked in at a June 2026 price that you negotiated when the factory was vulnerable.
This raises an important question regarding how we view procurement. You are essentially transforming a standard sourcing job into high-level macroeconomic hedging.
I love that phrasing.
By locking in that fixed price today, you are shorting global fossil fuel volatility by going long on Vietnam's domestic renewable grid infrastructure. You are betting that their newly stabilized grid will lower their costs, and you are using a 12-month contract to capture the financial delta of that transition.
It's literally a masterclass in timing the market.
It is, but it requires flawless execution. Phase 4 of the roadmap suggests scaling the strategy to encompass 50 to 60% of an importer's targeted sourcing categories by May 2027.
That's a huge volume shift.
Exactly. Managing that, ensuring that the receiving logistics networks in Sydney or Los Angeles or Rotterdam can actually handle the sudden influx of goods from a new origin point, requires that Phase 1 and Phase 2 were executed perfectly. You have to build a highly resilient foundation during the pilot phase before you pour 60% of your volume through it.
So what does this all mean for you listening? Bringing this 12-month roadmap to its conclusion, the urgency simply cannot be overstated. The window of opportunity is open right now, today, in June 2026.
The clock is ticking.
The port capacity in Vietnam is available. The factories are eager for volume and willing to negotiate heavily. By December 2026, those who followed this month-by-month playbook will have locked in sustainable, quality-controlled supply chains and fully protected their margins all the way through 2028.
And those who delay.
Delaying past September means losing your negotiation leverage entirely. You will be facing capacity shortages, elevated pricing, and crippling lead times. Now, the source material notes that specialized groups like Vietnam Direct Sourcing exist specifically to guide importers through this exact timing window.
Right, to help navigate all this.
Yeah, they handle the category audits, vet the suppliers for those ISO certifications, and manage the regional logistics to ensure you hit these deadlines. Being well-informed and acting decisively on this timeline literally translates to millions of dollars in margin protection.
It really represents a stark dividing line in global trade. It is the difference between implementing a proactive macroeconomic strategy today and paying a severe reactive penalty tomorrow.
But before we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave you with one final unaddressed concept to ponder. We've spent this time breaking down a truly incredible supply chain strategy. But there is a massive unspoken assumption baked into the very core of it. Yeah. The entire 12-month roadmap, every contract, every margin projection, hinges on Vietnam successfully bringing its domestic solar and wind renewable capacity online by Q4 2026.
That's a good point.
That infrastructure transition is the physical catalyst that lowers manufacturing costs and makes these fixed-price contracts viable for the factory owners. But what happens to the global supply chain and all those carefully negotiated contracts if extreme weather events or massive infrastructure failures delay that very renewable grid they are betting everything on?
That would be a massive disruption.
Exactly. If the domestic grid fails to transition on time and factories remain trapped paying premium prices for imported oil, does the entire arbitrage window shatter? It is something to seriously think about as you evaluate the vulnerabilities within your own supply chains. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.